Terrific. I think I'll get started, and folks will get a chance to grab their seat. I promise to be brief. My name is Jeff Tabelko. I'm fortunate to direct the Environmental Change and Security Program here, and today fortunate to be a collaborator with the Brazil Institute in bringing this tremendous program, tremendously rich program already. In some ways, this final panel is a bonus. We could go home and be happy with the discussion we've had already, but we have even more. And it's a tribute to Paulo and his colleagues for what they have assembled for us today. I'm going to be very brief, both in introductions and really get started, because we have the benefit of having an art exhibit that is to start at 6 p.m. So we want to give our panelists and all of you a full opportunity for presentation and discussion. We switched up the order a little bit from how it is in the program, so I'll introduce them in the order that we'll go. Marcelo Lessa is a Senior Investment Officer at the International Finance Corporation, IFC. Felipe Cruz will follow him. He's Coordinator of Strategies and Programs in Sustainable Development at Obrecht. And then batting cleanup will be Francisco Wolf, who is the Deputy Infrastructure Sectoral Analysis and Programming at the Andean Development Corporation, or CAF. So I will urge you to look at the full bios in the handout for the details of their really illustrious careers. We're under a panel that we've entitled Regional Dimensions of Infrastructure Development and the Environment. I think we'll have in the first two presentations some specific cases to really get some detail on how this is playing out, and then Francisco batting cleanup will bring us back up to some broader themes and considerations for discussion. So I'll turn the floor over to Marcelo.
Thanks, Jeff. If you have the opportunity or the interest to look at the bios, you're going to see that my bios, compared to the bios of the previous presenters, is incredibly short. I am not a researcher. I don't claim to be an expert in the issues that were discussed so far. In fact, I've been learning a lot with the researchers and presenters here and in other venues. What I do is I coordinate the agribusiness projects that IFC invests in Brazil. And just to parentheses, IFC is part of the World Bank Group. We only finance the private sector, and we work on project specific, meaning we find a company, we finance that company or that project. We have very limited involvement in general policies, which is usually done through our colleagues at the bank. In this capacity, I got involved in a few companies that approach us that were involved in producing commodities in the Amazon. That was 4 years ago, and we start discussing should we do this? If we should, how can we? We had lots of discussions, and we're working on some models. It's a working process. As everything in the Amazon, nothing is perfect. We've done a lot of things wrong. We've done a lot of things right. I think we're learning, and it's a path. But what is important that I think I bring to the discussion when I meet scholars and researchers is that I am in contact on a daily basis with the companies, the producers, the traders. Those are the companies that I talk every day, and I know their perspective, and I think there's a way to influence how these companies work in the Amazon. I think there's a window. I titled this Threat or Opportunity. It's a little bit of a rhetorical question. Obviously, the answer I can tell you right now, it's both. It's both a threat and an opportunity. And will depend on us, collectively, the people that discuss this type of issues, to let it just be a threat or try to turn it, at least partially, in an opportunity. I'm going to also repeat a lot of things that were discussed here in much more detail and with much more knowledge. But why agribusiness matter for the Amazon? And by Amazon, I'm talking mostly about the Brazilian legal Amazon, not the Andean Amazon, where agribusiness is less prevalent. Agribusiness in large scale is less prevalent. So why agribusiness matter? Well, it is the major economic activity of the Amazon region. If you put together logging, we usually don't get involved in logging. It's not part of what we do, what we've done in the Amazon. Cattle ranch and soy are significant cause of deforestation. There's no debate about that. Growing world demand for commodities has been discussed. Everybody knows about this, but this is a fact. This is a fact. I mean, China and the developing countries are buying more commodities. Prices are going up. Every time prices go up, people are willing to produce and to meet demand. Increased agricultural production results in demand for additional infrastructure. Some of the projects that were discussed here today are coming from demands from either directly or indirectly, either directly from the producers or indirectly through governors and things like that. Because there is agricultural production there and needs to be shipped to the markets. Well, the problem is also that additional infrastructure results in increased agricultural production by opening markets. So we're getting to, agribusiness is going to be part of this picture. And another important factor, technological advances allow farming challenging soils and climate. I don't have to tell you this. Most people here know more about this than I do. One of the people that I know and respect, Paulo Barreto from Amazon, recently showed me this graph. This is a work in progress. He asked me to make it clear. But just putting on the blue line is the price of soy deflated, the price of bag of 60 kilos of soy deflated, and the yellow line is the rate of deforestation year by year since 1994 to 2006. I'm not saying this is the main cause of deforestation. I think some people before me refer to several deforestation being caused by several causes. I think this is pretty logical, but look at the graph. There might be something there. Okay. What are the issues related to agribusiness in the Amazon, in the Brazilian Amazon, to be very specific? Well, first, most products are commodities. And what we mean by commodity? We mean that prices are set by market based on quality of not origin. Unfortunately, if I sell a soy that is produced by a socially and environmentally responsible producer, let's say in the state of Paraná, just because I'm from Paraná in Brazil, and I sell a soy that is planted along the BR-163 on land that was deforested 2 years ago, the price is exactly the same, except for the transportation. That is the reality of commodity market. Companies operate, all these agribusiness companies, it doesn't matter if it's a small producer or a larger producer. It all ends up being part of the international chain of commodities. These companies operate in an international competitive market. Soy, meat, corn, and sugar are traded in Chicago, in New York, in London, and prices are set based on quality, delivery, point of delivery, and things like that. Nobody cares, unfortunately. I'm not saying I agree. Nobody cares where this is coming from. And the growing world demand. Another issue, another set of issues. There's so many. Huh? I had a lot of work to put this in one slide. Environmental and social compliance of the supply chain, because in the Amazon, we're talking about the producer, the cattle rancher, the soy producer, then he sells to someone. This is his supply chain. Often, I say this is in Brazil, most issues are already regulated by law. So the deforestation, the legal reserve, the labor laws, they're laws on the books. So there's no economic rationale, and now some people are going to kill me. No economic rationale for the legal reserve. That is the reality. If you look, and what do I mean by that? In Brazil, you have to set aside 80%, and this is in the tropical forest area of the Amazon, doesn't cover the savanna. 80% you have, if you have a farm, You just bought a farm yesterday. It's completely forested. You have, by law, you have to set aside 80% of that area, and you can deforest, provided that you have an authorization from IBAMA, 20%. That's a little bit more complicated, but this is the summary of it. Okay? The problem is there is no economic rationale by this, but there are areas, okay, that probably, and I'm basing this on my experience, not on research, because we unfortunately have not found any research about this. There are areas where if you have a farm and you deforest only 20%, well, you can make a living out of that farm, even if you were to comply with the law. This is an issue. Failure of the government to enforce legislation. That's the most important issue we're talking when we talk about illegal, or in fact, deforestation in the Amazon. Total failure of the government to enforce legislation, because that's what it is. I mean, if you do a very simple math, 40% of the Amazon is protected area, so 60% is, let's say, up for grabs. Let's say either land without owner, which it's a large part in the Amazon, or owned by someone. 60%, if you can deforest 20%, that's 12% of that area that could deforest. Well, we're already in 20% of the area. So, you know, no traceability of the farm level, and we're going to talk a little bit more. But there is no, in Brazil, there's a lot of discussion about SISBOV, which is traceability, which I basically say, when I sell a cow to you, you know, there's a system that I can identify where this cow came from, where it was born, which people sold and resold and everything. So this is called traceability. There's no traceability, which means that the end purchaser of the commodity, even if it's willing to, cannot trace back where that commodity is coming from. Low technology farming and ranching, and I visited a lot of farms in the Amazon region. This is so prevalent for people that, like me, that know the sector. The forest in the next hectare provides cash flow. This is, for me, not based on any research, based on my experience and talking to farms. It's an important thing. It provides cash flow. The farmer cuts the trees because then he makes money that he can then buy some more cattle. And obviously clears up fertile land because he uses low technology in his farming. Cattle, this is also very important. It has been identified in some studies by some of our colleagues. Cattle is an investment. It requires low maintenance. It can be harvested at will. So why? What do you mean that? Well, I can sell when I need money. Soy, you can't. You have to harvest the soy in a certain week. Cattle, so it's kind of a savings account. And unfortunately, I should say, it moves by itself, so it doesn't require a lot of infrastructure. You can move cattle through very bad roads, and this is prevalent if you go to interior of São Félix do Xingu, for example. You see these ranchers, and you ask them, and they say, well, I've been from 300 kilometers, let's say 200 miles, 300 miles, with that herd of cattle. Land ownership. Serious issues related to land titling and particularly lack of georeferencing. I think you guys, everybody here knows more about this than I do. High level of illegality. Brazilian Amazon, there's recent studies showing that there are about 200 slaughterhouses in the Amazon. Only 87% registered at CIF. CIF is the most basic health regulation that you have to comply with slaughterhouse. Doesn't mean you pay tax. Doesn't mean you're a good corporate citizen. It doesn't mean anything. It means that your slaughterhouse has the most basic health certification. But it was 27 in 2004. So, is that too small? I'm sorry. Okay. All right, we can circulate this later. Opportunities. Where is the opportunity that when we look at this we see? Well, there's increased investment by large export-oriented companies. A lot of people, by the way, would say this is horrible. Well, in a sense, might be, but well, if you look at the bright side of it, what are the opportunities? Well, those companies are publicly traded or issue international bonds, and they're usually subject to a higher degree of scrutiny than the companies that were working there 5 years ago. Those 200 illegal slaughterhouses that account to no one, that don't care, they don't even pay tax. Increased importance to corporate social responsibilities issues on these companies. They're more concerned about this. Brazilian companies are becoming even more concerned. Why? They're exporters. EU is a large market and demands high standards. Unfortunately, both on the cattle and the soy, sustainability is not yet a major one. I think we're moving towards there. We're moving towards there, but it's not. And most important, in our view, is that these companies have more power to require standards from its supply chain. So we can tell them, if we have the right carrot, which we're trying, if we have the right carrot, we say, look, you're trying to be a corporate citizen, why don't you require your suppliers, or why don't you only buy and sell a sign to the market that you buy to suppliers that will comply with a set of requirements that include labor, include environment, and other things. Other opportunity, increased concern by civil society of the linked supply chain deforestation. I have to tell you this. For example, Greenpeace Eating the Amazon campaign recently had a major impact in this soy moratorium. I think this type of thing is very important. European consumers are sensitive to this issue, much more than any other consumers in the world, but they also pay more, they also consume a lot, so companies like to sell there, and they're becoming more demanding on this issue. Federal government attempting, and the working word here is attempting, to extend traders' responsibility to its supply chain through this Decree 6321 of December 21st, 2007, basically saying that if you buy from someone that is in the blacklist that will be created by Obama in terms of deforestation, then somehow you'll be liable for fines. So you shouldn't buy for those. How this is going to be implemented, I have serious doubts, but it is a step in the direction of bringing this type of issues, supply chain trader, to the discussion. Better use of farming techniques will increase productivity and reclaim degraded areas. There was some discussion about this before me. Particularly, I think that higher returns allow farmers to invest in conservation and maintaining the legal reserve. It is true that the new generation of farmers are much more attuned, aware of the problem of the environment. And I can tell you, we're not the only ones that are concerned with this. If you go to Tucumán, for example, it's for those that know Amazon quite well, it's let's say in the frontier of deforestation, illegality. I mean, worse than Tucumán can probably only be São Félix do Xingu. If you go to Tucumán, they had a drought. This is an area that had a lot of rain. They had a drought recently. The city had to ration the water. They are concerned about these issues also. The problem is, where are the economic incentives? And to some extent, if you put pressure on them, where is the cash flow that these farmers need to comply with the legal reserve? Monetization of carbon credits and ecosystem service could have a substantial impact in this whole equation, obviously. And we, with our IFC, with our colleagues from the World Bank, are working currently on what we call the Amazon Partnership Framework to support economic development and conservation, that tries to bring both the public sector and the private sector working towards issues like this here. I think I did probably under 10 minutes, so I have the credit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. And we'll just go straight to Felipe's presentation. Sir, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, it's not good evening, it's good afternoon. I have my watch with the time in Brazil yet, so good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much. Paulo is not here, I think. Oh, yeah, here. Okay, thank you, Paulo. Thank you very much. Well, I'm here to present, although I'm from a Brazilian company, I'm here to present to you a specific project we are working in Peru. And it is very much a road inside the IIRSA project, the overall IIRSA project, which is the IIRSA Sul project, and what we are doing down there to mitigate the impacts that are generated by the road. It's more the indirect impacts than the direct impacts that I think we are focusing on here. Okay? I have to say that I'm a bit depressed by this time of the day after receiving so many information about how bad is the situation and what we have to do. And as I'm working on the ground with those things, it's difficult to keep you up with that, because it is very difficult to work when you are working on the ground doing things. It's not like, let's say, tasting new ideas, trying new ideas, thinking of possibilities. No, it's actually on the ground doing things. And that's what I think we should be looking at. We have to do things. We are discussing too much. That's my impression. We are working on a very small area here, although it's 700 kilometers. This work. Yeah. It's in this area here. That goes near Cusco, all the way through the border of Brazil here, and goes from the Cusco region, and then go through the region of Madre de Dios up to the frontier of Brazil in the Assis, Brazil city. And then arrive a company to do a work like that on a region that is very, very poor. 90% of the population is below the extreme poverty or poverty, with lots of problems of health problems and educational problems. The teachers are called the Wednesday teachers because they only can reach the cities on a Wednesday. They cannot arrive before Wednesday, and they have to go back, otherwise they are not able to do. So that's the reality of when you are there on the ground. And that's a similar situation in Madre de Dios. That was Cusco, and this one is Madre de Dios. At the same time, to complicate that or to give more concern about the situation, we are on a region that is one of the hotspots of the world hotspots of biodiversity, because this area crosses the Vilcabamba-Amboró Conservation Corridor, which is here, exactly somewhere in the Andes Tropicais area that is very keen for the world, actually. And the road crosses exactly in the middle of this Vilcabamba-Amboró corridor that is here. And one of the main issues we have here is the biodiversity connectivity in this area that we have to take care of, other than the overall social situation I just mentioned. So I'm trying to summarize here a 400-page study in 10 minutes conversation. So it's... So I decided to go looking at maps. If you go further on this information, we found that in this area here, we have three main zones that we have to look carefully at. One is this buffer zone for the Reserva Nacional Tambopata. The other one is the Corredor Manu-Tambopata, that is the connection here from the Manu National Reserve to the Tambopata National Reserve. And on the other hand, you have here the Yungas, it's another corridor, Manu-Bauarra-Sonene, another connection here that would create the possibility to maintain the connectivity on these corridors. So in terms of conservation, we are focusing mainly in those three areas to work with. Just to give you some ideas here of size, and I have to say, after listening, I think Paulo was talking about 65 million hectares of deforestation. This is a very, very small project we are talking about here. When you talk here, you see this area here, this green area here, this is 156,000 hectares that ACA, someone from ACA just mentioned here, yes, and they are working here for ages to keep that only by research, doing scientific research and not even doing ecotourism at the moment in order to maintain that conservation going on in that area. You have here all the timber area and here the Brazil nuts area. This is about 800 concessions consolidated in Peru, but they are very small. It's a mosaic of very small things here, very small piece of land of about 50 hectares, more or less. But that altogether, if we compare with this, it's about 500,000 hectares altogether here. And then in this area here, I was guessing with Pedro, that's probably another 500,000 hectares here on this timber area. In those three areas, we are talking about 250,000 hectares, and here is 156,000. So if you manage this very, very well, and if we are able to achieve a tremendous result out of this project, we may be talking here about 1 million hectares, which is nothing compared to the 65 million hectares of deforestation we just mentioned a few minutes ago. And it's hard work. I'm talking about at least 5 years, 5 to 10 years project in order to move that forward, and that's what we are looking at. On the midterm, because you're going to see that we have not focused in the beginning of the project. We designed a 5-year project focusing on the, as said before, there are an impact of around 50 kilometers around a road, and then we decided to work in this area, looking at this 550 kilometers around the road, and we focus on a variety of programs. And these are a second level of programs. They are very big, and they have to start with building up the governance of this area. There are a variety of actors working here, but they are not very well organized yet. So we have to work together, make successful initiatives, productive initiatives, and then as we grow on the governance, we go in this area, and that is going to make the big impact in the region. There are basic principles, like any other sustainable development project has to be. It has to be constructed together with the locals. And when I'm talking about the locals, I'm not talking about the poor people living around the area. I'm talking everyone who is involved with that. The CAF people, the FOMIN people, BID people, the construction people, the governors in the area, the overall government, federal government, local governments, all the, I need a glass, some water, on this. So it's emphasis on local governance, making sure that this governance, we are here for 25 years because it's a concession, this project. So we as Odebrecht are here for 25 years. So we have time to work on this governance and then live as much as we can. Thank you very much. The rational land use planning and management is a key element of this, no doubt about that. And we have to go, and we have to move. We have to go, we have to build this on a step-by-step basis. There's no way to do that on a... we have a partner there, Eduardo Nicander, who is very well known in the region. And Eduardo is working 14 years in the Reserva Nacional de Tambopata. And he's now about 50%, 60% of his business is with the community because he developed a logic that he passes the business to the community as we go. So at this moment in time, after 14 years, 60% is completely with the local community. We have to make sure there is a business criteria into eco-production. Yes, it has to be production of things that are goods, of products that are very much friendly to the environment. But we have to put a logic of production chain. We have to look at the market. We have to look at the transportation. We cannot just, it cannot be something, let's say, philosophical. It has to be linked with the business itself. Of course, local heritage preservation and biodiversity and environmental conservation are basic principles on this. We have to have an holistic approach. Yes, we have to mobilize people around the ideas. You have to create something that we want to go for and the people want to go for together. Education, culture, as Paulo was saying, is a key element of any transformation we want to do. We have to invest in technical assistance, but we cannot lose the production. That's why we intend to develop this in the way we are doing it. It's starting doing things. So we are starting a small scale projects in the region, but we are also talking about 300,000 people in this region. So when you talk about 200 families that are dedicated to, in one area of the road of creation of camélidos, that's, I don't know how the word of that in English is, but the vicunhas and that kind of thing. This is a business, but we have to put them together. We have to make sure that the quality of what they produce are better and they can export. So we have to face the market. So but at the end, if you create something that is good, you have 200 families that are already involved on the good result project. And we believe that that's the way we will be able to create a big business in the future in the region. Okay, so and the government, as said, we have to put together everyone we can put together, everyone who can make influence in any situation. We are bringing in, it's a toll road. We are bringing in the SUNAT, because SUNAT is probably one of the key elements, is the inland revenue in Peru. And they work, it's said that is one of the most important elements in the government of Peru. So we are bringing SUNAT to be on the pay, postos de pedágio. The toll offices or toll points, in order to make, for instance, to follow the illegal transportation of timber, for instance. And so there are possibilities and opportunities to make sure that thing is helpful. At the same time, CAF is here, FOMIN BID is here, conservation. We start building this association that's here on this since the very beginning. We start the project together with Conservation International and Pro Naturaleza. CONISA is the concessionaire of the road, but is also, Odebrecht is also here, present here. So we put together Conservation and Pro Naturaleza, which is a very active entity in Peru for a long time. So we are building up the governments as we go. And then we talk with the government of Cusco, the government of Madre de Dios, and we are bringing people together as much as we can without losing the result. As this become a project, we are a private entity. In the moment we start a project like that, we have to look at the end. We have to look at what we are going to deliver. And that's the pressure we are going to have in our minds from our board to start with. That's why we do like that. And then we have 4 lines of programs or of actions with 14 programs inside that. One is responsible tourism. This is an area where Cusco already attracts 500,000 people every year. And Madre de Dios also attracts a lot of people. And there are lots of things in between the two that are possible to be visited and to become a product. In that sense, we are trying to work with things that are there. We are not reinventing anything. For instance, there is already, Alsangate is a mountain that is 4,900 meters high. The road passes nearby the Alsangate. So there is already a product that to visit the Alsangate. So but it's just not professional. So we are working with the people that are doing that and making this a product that can be really sold. Okay, the business, the eco business in general, they go all the way through the road according to vocation that we are investigating each one of the areas we are discussing. We had done a research, not let's say a new research, because there is a lot of information on that. There are tons of information available to anyone who wants to gather the information and design a project. It's incredible that. And biodiversity conservation, I said before, there are 3 points that we want to work with. And the strategy there is we are going to work most probably together with IIRSA because they are very successful in the area and they have a lot of experience, and also with conservation that was already there and Pro Naturaleza. But we are bringing IIRSA as well to become like partners on this. And the local governments, we have to work on around the whole road to build up the local governments. Peru is a very centralized republican. But they say it's going in the direction of the departments, but it's not like that, because there is no capacity built in the region. So you have to work that way. So people say, well, there is the canon of the oil business, but there is no projects to use the canon in the regions, and then the money goes to the central government again. So we have to work from the local governments all the way through the federal government. We have to work both ways in order to. But again, we want to make that from the successful productive initiatives. And then if you make people stronger, and they can do more in what we expect them to go for. There is an overall coordination that there's an entity was created that have those four, plus CAF, and others that can come as they are like a board of the project. And this entity is going to start the program, is going to do what is needed to do as planning and to develop like transversal programs, stuff like that. But in the future, this has to be just one of the stakeholders in the region. And we have to develop the local centers that they should assume the leadership of each one of these areas. So this is a summary of what we are doing in the whole region. These are the biodiversity conservation areas, those 3 points. This is the road, and then we are going to implement 5 nucleus of local development with a specific each one's governance, and based on a variety of things that were defined going through each one of these areas to identify what is vocation in that area, what people want to do, what's there already in some extent, in order to be strength as we go. That's what I want to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Felipe. I think we'll just turn the floor over to Francisco, and then we'll have discussion.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to Paulo and to the Woodrow Wilson Institute Center for this great opportunity. To be all here together. It's always a challenge to speak at the end of a long afternoon with so many brilliant speakers before. It's hard to say anything new, but they also make it easier when they have made such a well-articulated connection of presentations that try to decompose and digest for us what I think is a very, very complex issue, which is what I would call sort of the Amazon problem. What to do with the Amazon, what's happening with the Amazon, and how do we think intelligently about it. I am, just anecdotically, particularly proud to be speaking to you now, here, right after our friend Felipe. I was the team leader for the CAF multidisciplinary team that was put together to help the Peruvian government find a way of implementing this road project. And if it had not been for the very successful partnership that was put in place between the private sector, the public sector, and the very valuable contribution from a number of international and local NGOs that participated in a great deal of debates prior to the implementation of the project about what was at stake and how it should be done, this project would have never gotten off the ground. And I think that this project is now well underway to be a very interesting success in a very controversial area, in a very difficult area that is a demonstration, a showcase of the challenges that we face in dealing with what I call the Amazon problem. I will take for today's final comments, I guess, the perspective of all of those people around South America that are trying to think about this issue from a medium to long-term regional strategic perspective. And what do we see? first, when we look at the Amazon, this is a very serious concern. This is a very, we have the sense of gravity. This is gravity? No. Yeah, it's a serious problem, and it takes a sleep away. You know, it makes. I mean, we live next to, around, within this amazing territory, this amazing ecosystem. We feel as part of our identity, of who we are as people, and it's part of our future. And we know that something is going on, and we try to understand what is going on and how we feel this is a threat that is affecting our future, the future of our children, and we're trying to understand what is it and what can we do about it. When we pay attention to the issue, we read the literature and we try to find out what's going on, we find that there are multiple and conflicting values and interests and visions that are being presented from multiple voices about what is going on. The whole thing is very complex. It has an inherent complexity with a lot of elements, a lot of different disciplines and different types of scientists and experts, each one talking about their own thing, many variables, many dimensions. It's very hard to formulate comprehensive statements that explain to us what this problem is, and even harder, of course, to formulate a comprehensive vision for the future that can rally the consensus of enough, a critical mass of actors to achieve concrete, specific results. This is why I think it's particularly valuable, an event like today's and the work that Conservation International has done in trying to put together in this very brief, for the complexity of the topic, study that takes us through a number of issues and tries to stimulate some intelligent discussion. But we're also faced with what I call the trap of analysis paralysis. Life does not pause for us to do, for us to think and understand what is going on, and then be able to intervene opportunely. Things are happening everywhere while we are here, and they have consequences. And these consequences, these things are happening, and the consequences that they have will ultimately be blamed on the governments. And this is what I called the minister's conundrum. Put yourself in the place of any government minister in any of the countries that share the Amazon, and he or she is there in her office thinking about these things, and they know that they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. Whatever they do, they're going to be blamed for the consequences of everything that is going on as a consequence of whatever they did. And if they don't do anything, then they're going to be blamed for not doing anything about it and all that comes with it. And this minister's conundrum is, in my view, at the core of understanding the dynamic of this Amazon problem, what we can do about it, and how we can be a constructive influence in the process, and not just another frustrated observer that watches what is going on and is feeling powerless and more despaired every day. This has something to do with the debate that has been showing up in the afternoon about safeguard policies. I think I have a strong position against safeguard policies. I think safeguard policies are a catastrophic failure, I think, in the part of international financial institutions. They are all about impeding action, about telling you how not to do things. And what people in the position of decision-making and public policy-making need is help in how to do things. And what we need to find out is what is the dynamic of constructive collective effort. How can we all put together our wisdom and our experience to make things happen that are good things, and not lecture people on what not to do or how not to do things, because that definitely doesn't work. In the end, safeguard policies have resulted in extremely complex and lengthy process of project design that often means that when the project is finally, the project design process is finally complete, the reality has already changed so significantly from the time when all the studies, the diagnostic studies, and the initial technical information was produced, that probably the project needs to be reconsidered all over again. And so that doesn't work. And while people are engaged in this lengthy process of project design, reality is changing and things are happening out there, and those things have consequences, and those consequences are coming back to the minister's desk in the form of complaints. We have had a lot of technical presentations today. My second point will be only a brief reflection on the nature of this threat over the Amazon, of the Amazon ecosystem. What is happening here? And what I want to highlight is that I think that it's important to distinguish two fundamentally different dynamics that are taking place in parallel. First, there is the challenge of economic development in South America. Unfortunately, South America does not have a success story to tell when it comes to its long-term socioeconomic development. We have been a region at the forefront of innovation in development economics and development theory, since the end of World War II. We have produced some of the most internationally renowned intellectuals and professionals in the field of economic development. A lot of theory and a lot of very profound and stimulating reflection has come out from the Latin American experiments and discussions, the debates that have taken place in Latin America. Yet today, Latin America is worse off than it was 50 years ago. And when we compare the performance of Latin America as a region to the performance of other emerging regions in the world, we also see that we have not done definitely near as well as we could have done in addressing partial but basic fundamental development problems, like the provision of basic, very fundamental, very basic services to everybody, like housing, water, health, and education. Minimum standards of those basic services to our population. And we have an increasing problem of marginal poverty, of critical poverty and inequity, and this is a problem. If today, if Latin America were to grow at a rate comparable to the growth rate of our best period of growth, of our best 5-year period of growth, which was a 90 to 95 period, roughly. If we were to sustain that rate of growth over time, and the rest of the world were to stay at steady state, were not to change one bit, it would take us over 80 years for Latin America to catch up with the living standards with the rest of the world, with the level of the standard of living of a country like Spain or like Portugal. And of course, since they are growing a little bit, at some minimum rates, if we were to take a rate of improvement in their quality of life of Spain or Portugal of 2% per year, then it would take probably 160 years for Latin America to catch up with that standard of living. This is a major challenge and a major problem for our political leadership in the region. This way of looking at this has clearly sent the message that the problem of South American development cannot be addressed by pursuing business as usual. The business as usual approach will not work. If you do what you have always done, you will get what you have always gotten. So this has really brought home in the last decade the urgency of finding a new approach, doing something new. And the answer or the half answer that South America has found to this challenge is integration, regional integration. The most fundamental structural change that is being attempted to produce in South America in this decade is to forget about the national vision, the national process of planning development based on national interest, and try to understand what is going on in South America as a region, and try to think of our problems as common regional problems, and try to put together the the capabilities and the uniqueness that our own diversity generates, to try to see if we together as 12 countries can come up with a better way of understanding our development. This is a very tall order. It's a very difficult process. When you think about the process of regional integration in Europe, which is one of the most developed, most culturally, in terms of education and human capital, advanced regions of the world, and after all the incentives that they had to sort of sit together and work together after so many regional wars and 2 world wars, and it has taken them 50 years to achieve the kind of quasi construction of a regional governance that they have now with this European Union. Well, imagine how much more difficult that same challenge would be for a region like South America. And this is what South American leadership is attempting to do. And this in the context of a much broader problem, which is the global failure of, or the global questioning, so to speak, of a overall global development model that also falls into question with movies like an Inconvenient Truth and the scientific evidence that is pumping up recently through the work of people like Jared Diamond, and I don't know if you have read his work on collapse. There's a less known political scientist, Thomas Homer Dixon from the University of Toronto, who has just written last year a book called The Upside of Down, and it's from a more sort of a political science approach, combining physical and natural science with social economics and politics, basically coming to the same conclusions, and it is that the world is heading towards some kind of a fundamental collapse over the next 100 years, and this is driven by a number of factors, physical and man-made, and how all of that is challenging each region in its own way. Well, Latin America has to deal with that challenge as well. I would say it's possible, this leads me to the second dimension of the threat, it's possible that the greatest threat to the Amazon be not an internal threat, that one that comes from the efforts of the local population to solve their own immediate sort of short-term problems. But it's possible that the greatest threat may actually end up being the process of rapid depletion of natural resources elsewhere in the world, combined with the efforts of climate change, that may actually make all our local level efforts for conservation eventually be swept away by the tsunami that would be the global fight for natural resources 50 years from now or 80 years from now, when water scarcity and major environmental collapse affects other regions so severely that they will come to probably one of the regions that I think will survive the crisis a little bit longer, and they will come fighting for our resources to take them to satisfy the needs elsewhere. So this gives us the idea, I think, that the Amazon problem is not only a problem about what is going on in the Amazon, but it's also a problem about what is going on elsewhere in the world, what is going on here in Washington, D.C. or in Chicago with our standard of living and with our level of consumption, and how much are we prepared to give up of that in order to preserve the Amazon and other valuable ecosystems that are the basis for the sustainability of human life as we know it in the world. So I believe that Amazon conservation requires collective action, and collective action not only among Amazon shareholders, local or regional shareholders, but also stakeholders. Collective action of the global community. And in this sense, I think the work of Conservation International in the report is pointing at some directions in which some of this collective action can take place. But collective action requires regional or global collective cooperation mechanisms to conceptualize and to implement collective strategies. And the construction of collective cooperation mechanisms is a complex process. It requires increased relationships among neighbors that allows them to value the things that they share, to value the things that they have in common, so that they can put their heads together to find ways to protect them. And this is exactly what the IIRSA process is doing. The IIRSA process is a dialogue in an imperfect world. It starts by getting people together, getting some of the key players together, and help them, force them to talk about whatever we can. But talk. Try to get them around the table and try to get them to talk, to exchange information about what each one of them is thinking, in the way that each one of them is thinking about it, so that by getting to know each other a little bit more, they can start developing the practice of sitting around, working together, building consensus, and try to give them some positive feedback that allows a constructive dynamic to get started, so that eventually more complex issues can be tackled and more complex solutions can be attempted. So IIRSA tries to bring these people together, tries to keep them together, to keep them at the table by trying to provide them some half-controversial things to talk about and to work with. And then the IIRSA process tries to build from there, to start raising the bar little by little without scaring them away. So it requires patience, and it requires shrewdness. It requires this ability to try to poke people so that they can move out of their positions of comfort, but at the same time not poke them so hard that they will jump at you and not want to come back to the table. Keeping the consensus so that the process can go on has found a fundamental challenge with the Amazon problem. The IIRSA process is not just about the Amazon problem. The IIRSA process is about the whole process of South American integration, which in fact, fortunately, I guess, most of the process of South American integration does not go through the Amazon problem. There are other dimensions and other spaces in which the process of South American integration can and is taking place that allows us to advance a little bit in that process while we figure out what to do with the Amazon problem. So far, the rule of consensus when it comes to the Amazon has meant that for the IIRSA process, Amazon interventions have been really minimum. A lot of projects have been presented, a lot of projects have been discussed, but very few of them have actually been advanced. And those that have been advanced, thanks to the IIRSA process and the level of collective exposure, collective awareness, and collective creative efforts that this process puts together, those projects that are actually moving forward under the IIRSA process in the Amazon region are projects like the one that we just saw that are actually innovating in the way we do things and trying to demonstrate a better approach, a more comprehensive approach of intervening in these regions in a way that promotes development, that deals with social and with the social concerns, that deals with people, and at the same time preserves the environment for future generations. Therefore, as a provocative thought, I guess, I would like to leave with you the idea that the IIRSA process is really not the enemy of the Amazon conservation, but is in fact a very powerful ally that we need to understand, that we from the financial institutions that are supporting it and also from the governments that are taking place in need to be able to reflect on and to open up, to improve the quality of the process, to improve the level of participation. Yes, there are many things that can be done in a better way, but this process is actually a part of the solution to the challenges that the region is facing, and not, a part of the problem. I'm not going to say much about the challenge for the rest of the world, but I think it's important to just leave it there that the problem of the Amazon, or the Amazon problem, is not just a problem of what is going on within the region, it's also a problem of what is going on elsewhere in other regions of the world with their own patterns of development and their own developmental challenges. And it's part of the process of global change. And therefore, we do need to work on an improvement of global mechanisms for cooperation, for global governance, maybe new rules for trade that can facilitate or generate new mechanisms for addressing difficult and expensive problems. And we need to work on a new global sort of development model. And this all leads to what I think is I would leave as my closing message to you, the urgent need for a global debate on values, which I think needs to be public and needs to be broad. And this has something to do with the question about information about tipping points and things like that. I think that the more information that we have, the higher quality of the debate we're going to have, and the greater the collective awareness and consciousness that we have about the complexity of these issues, and therefore I think the higher quality of collective decision making. We need to ask ourselves questions about what is development for, who is developing, who has the right to develop and who doesn't. And we need to be able to enter into this type of debate, courageously, frontally, frankly, and we need to have it seriously. We need to have institutions doing serious and thorough, deep research on these issues, publish controversial documents and publications that will make a lot of people uncomfortable, but that hopefully will make institutions like this one enthusiastic to bring people together and to have these debates. So this is a little bit of the answer to the minister's conundrum that I presented, and the answer is, you don't wait for the minister to tell you what to do. You do whatever you can from wherever you are in society, and hopefully the minister will catch up and jump on board in the process. Thank you very much.
Terrific. Thank you, gentlemen, all three of you, for rich presentations. Why don't we take a few questions and give our panelists an opportunity to respond, and then we'll adjourn for the reception. If we could pass the microphone right here in the middle, and then we'll come over to John Pielmeyer next, then Carlos.
Thank you. Jane Pratt from the Instituto de Montaña. My question's for Marcelo Leza. The New York Times yesterday carried an article that the European Union was responding to that sensitivity of the population that you referred to by actually preparing a proposal to ban the importation of biofuels, including soy, that were not carbon neutral. Other than being a boon to Chinese pig farmers, I can see that there would be lots of consequences for that. What I'm interested in specifically is how might that play out within the IFC, where so many of your executive directors are from EU countries? Do you expect that that would influence the kind of investment that you would be able to continue?
Terrific. That's a wonderful question. I think we'll take a couple of them here and then give our panelists. So John Pielmeyer next, and then Carlos Nobre down here, and then we'll go to the back.
Hi, I'm an independent consultant, and I've been involved with Brazil a couple of times with USAID, including in the 90s when I was involved with the Amazon program. I'm a similar question, mostly for Marcelo, and in terms of industry standards, which you alluded to. In the Congo Basin, where I've also worked more recently, attempts to certify and to bring standardization, especially with EU leadership, to timber and timber export policies have run into big problems with the introduction of the Chinese coming in a big way. And I'm interested in whether you see that affecting the Amazon broadly? And secondly, more specifically for the IFC, what is the IFC doing, if anything, to encourage industry standards, either with soy or timber or other elements? We've heard some discussions in the past, some elements where CI and WWF have been working with individual industry leaders. Does IFC see it playing a role there?
Terrific, John. Carlos?
Yes, this is a question to Felipe. It seems to be an interesting pilot experiment, this development, regional development, around the construction of the interoceanic highway or parts of it. I have one comment and then one question. A bit of advice. I think you should study, if you haven't done, the frustrating experience in Brazil in the last 13 years, funded by the so-called Rainforest Trust Fund, this PPG7 pilot project on the rainforest, tropical rainforest of Brazil. So about $400 million were poured into this. Many things, some things worked, but the initiatives of sustainable development, the small-scale business, very similar to the ones that you're proposing there, that failed. And it's interesting for you, since you're starting something new outside of Brazil, but very similar, and same environment, same distance, etc., etc. It would be interesting for you to try to understand what failed in those projects. My question is that of course, your original development project is a project that the central element is the highway. So you want to bring in tourists, you want to take out products, raw materials, commodities, and I don't see, perhaps I did not pick correctly, but I don't see two things. One is some element of industrialization at a regional scale, which is not totally dependent on having a paved highway. And primarily, service in the future, service are becoming more and more important in the world economies. They are very important today. And knowledge as a service to markets will become very important. So are there elements there that, we would reach to this high end, but primarily, some level of
Okay. And then if we could just run the microphone back up to the lady almost in the back in the white.
Lena Barrera from Conservation International. My question's for Francisco. I much appreciated sort of your recognition of some of the elements that have been brought up in this report and by other similar groups as to the risk for reaching sort of the level of environmental degradation that leads to some sort of collapse in the long term. And I think that in and of itself is what provides a case for long-term development planning that's well-informed. And from our perspective, that's at the level of the region rather than at the project level that, as you mentioned, sort of slows things down. And I was wondering if you could give us some examples of how that question is being discussed or addressed within the IIRSA forum.
Okay, thank you very much. Why don't we give each of our panelists an opportunity to make concluding remarks addressing these questions, and then we'll have an opportunity to all continue these conversations informally. So, Felipe, would you like to kick us off with?
Yep, it's okay. Yes, Carlos, well, I need to learn about the experience you just mentioned to understand. But, of course, I said in the presentation that I was trying to summarize a 400-page study with all the programs detailed and defined. And obviously, each one of the programs, they have an industrial element on it. It's not a huge industrial element, but there is an industrial element. I mentioned the chain, the production chain approach, going from the creation of things, the improvement of, for instance, the cattle, not the cattle, the vicunhas and the quality of the animals, but all the way through the frigorífico, camal in Spanish, and then all the way through the market. So it's a productive chain approach in each one of the programs we are talking about. When we talk about knowledge, yes, it's very much focused on the low end of that, because we believe in education. I believe that the ITA project you mentioned is fantastic, and there are things like that in Brazil, like Embrapa is a similar example. And but we believe that in the moment we are in the level of need that we have in the area, we have to make things work, and we have to make technical assistance and education, but focused on the demand to make things work, and then that will make like a movement. I don't believe that development is something that you can just implement. I think it's a movement that you start, and by the success, you can achieve more and more things. That's let's say the rationale in what we are talking here.
Francisco. Yeah, no. Marcelo?
No? Okay. In answer to the two questions, I have not read the New York Times article. It's in my inbox, but I didn't have time to read before I came here. On biofuels, I happen to be the focal person in biofuels in IFC also. In biofuels, we've taken, since the beginning 3 years ago, a very conservative approach. We have financed very few biofuels projects, all of them, with very few exceptions and very localized and small, were sugarcane based within existing plantations. So, and there was clearly no threat to forest, new forest. It unfortunately does not solve the problem, because when you plant sugarcane here, you move a less profitable crop to the next hectare, and again, this is a supply chain. But we've taken this approach. Obviously, if the EU takes what you're describing, and I've heard of this some time ago already. I think it was initiated by the Dutch government, which was very concerned about this. I think those type of initiatives are incredibly welcome, because this is the carrot that the supply chain, the agribusiness needs to say, okay, I now have a product that I can sell you, and I can certify, I can guarantee you it's coming from this area, and how this is going to play on the board, I cannot talk about the board, but we are on biofuels. We were very concerned. We're very concerned about deforestation, but also we're very concerned about the issue of linking biofuels and food, which now it's a mainstream. We were incredibly criticized 3 years ago. I was incredibly criticized 3-4 years ago, because we were refusing to do biofuels project. And now it's a very good development that this discussion is on the table, because it does have tremendous impact on the supply chain, as we can see. On your question, if I got it right, we are not encouraging any industry standard for the purpose of deforestation. Unfortunately, there are no industry standards. The forest certification is the one that we use as a model, but it's not entirely applicable to things like soybean and cattle, because usually they don't have a supply chain. They're just managing their own forests, and they're certified their own forests. We're not encouraging new certifications. We think certification is something that the market, the consultants, the NGOs, the companies that do this, they have different certifications, and certifications then become more acceptable, more recognized or not. What we were pushing into these two companies that we've done is that, okay, you have to find a way to tell me or to guarantee that you only buy from suppliers that comply with, and then a list of things, okay? Amongst them is no new deforestation, which is the basic one. But it's not that easy, because most farms in the Amazon are not georeferencing. So you have the pictures. You go to Amazon or IPAN, we know, you can see the area. I can see there was deforestation. I don't know where that farm is. And then even if I know a farm, I cannot check with an IBAMA authorization to do that deforestation. So it's very complicated. But I think we're moving in that direction. And my hope, our hope actually is more than a hope because it is happening, is that pressure at the government is coming from several areas, not only from the civil society, which I think is incredibly welcome, but it's also coming from the companies, because some of these companies, soybean traders, a few of them are very, very concerned about this. They have clients that require them to certify that they're not encroaching on forest. They're finding very difficult to give this assurance to the client. And more recently, cattle. Cattle is a much more complicated issue. We were very criticized with the recent project we did. We still think we're making progress, and we're now getting, 70% of the Brazilian industry, companies that represent 70% of the Brazilian meat industry. We got into a room with several NGOs, some of them are represented here, some researchers, and we're starting to work towards what we call beef roundtable. Okay? These guys, we need to find a way to start working on this, on working with your supply chain to make sure that your supply chain is not doing these bad things. It's very difficult. It's a long, long way. It needs the collaboration of everybody. There's no way, none of these problems, at least in my area, none of these problems that we're faced cannot be solved by one set of institutions, of people. Cannot. It depends on the government, depends on civil society putting pressure, depends on the companies putting pressure on their supply chain, depends on the banks putting the carrots in the right place. It depends on the farmers taking the initiative for that. They need to be pressure, either through law enforcement or through voluntary. And a lot of them are concerned, as I said. I think it's not a good image that we say they're all bad people just cutting the forest. There's economic incentives. There's a lot of people that are concerned about this. I'm not painting a rosy picture. I don't think the picture is that rosy, but I don't think it's black and white. It's gray. Did I answer a question? Okay. My closing remarks will be just 1 minute to say that Tim started by putting that picture of the utilitarian and utopian, and then the middle ground, the deforestation. I think none of these problems will be solved if we don't work with the utilitarian and the utopian. I mean, we have to sit down with these people. We have to work with these companies. We have to work with their buyers, with their suppliers, with the civil society, but to put this together and address these problems. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. This is a very complex process. I'm going to try to give you a brief overview. The IIRSA initiative started by sort of like an initial sort of regional overview that was, as I think Pedro Vara was mentioning, an evolution on a sort of regional planning, medium to long-term planning exercise, strategic planning exercise that was done by the government of Brazil, and then the IDB, with some of the people that were involved in that initial exercise, took it one step further to try to include all of South America in the process. And then the presidents and the governments got involved, and CAF got involved somewhat into that. And that led to the initial process of producing a work plan, a 10-year work plan for developing this initiative. So that was a sort of a first instance of addressing long-term development issues as a regional, sort of a broad collective effort. That got a process started, that brought key actors with some kind of a mandate to the table, and then they started working on it. And at the beginning, it was a very chaotic process. It was it very rapidly moved to a very project level. Each government came with a long list of projects. Said, we want to do all of these things. This is our wish list of projects that need to be taken. And then the banks started working with the governments to try to understand that incredibly long list of projects. It was around 500 projects in that list, and that was not for all of the hubs that we have in right now presented for the organization of the territory. And in that process, again, it was then the Secretary of Planning of Brazil, Jose Paulo Silveira, who suggested, we need a strategic vision exercise. And he proposed to the countries that they would ask the banks to try to collect information based on all the positions that the governments had brought to the table. There's a major problem in this process of, I don't know how to characterize it, but collective action, everybody, nobody wants to be outstaged by nobody else, but nobody wants to put its neck on the line, And so I think that the banks have played a role sometimes of doing the uncomfortable things that the governments don't dare to do sort of unilaterally. We have a first crack at it. We try to put some kind of working document on it that can capture what we see is the status of the consensus, I guess, in the process, and offer it back to them for reaction. And so we did something like that with this strategic vision for South America. It was an incomplete document, I would say. It was an effort, a best effort, probably, that tried to link the broader sort of socioeconomic development challenges with the specific level of responsibility of the ministries that were involved in the table. So planning and infrastructure ministries. And try to tell them, try to show them what was the link between infrastructure actions and broader sort of development dynamics. And then with that strategic vision document process, we tried to generate a debate among the region, among the governments on this, and we were hoping to use that as a tool to bring other actors, non-governmental actors, private sector, academics, NGOs, into this discussion to inform the process of regional planning. Unfortunately, we failed at that at the time. We after several attempts, the governments were so cautious about the many sensitivities involved in this discussion that they, repeatedly refused to allow us to take the step of going sort of more public with this. Nonetheless, all of these documents were eventually made public, are available through the webpage of the IIRSA initiative, and have fallen into the hands of observers and commentators of the IIRSA initiative, and have been used to produce a debate outside, sort of in the media and whatever that, sometimes it has an effect, sort of a echo effect inside the government sort of dynamic. Sometimes it doesn't, and it's weak. And then came a third level of planning, or of long-term development planning, or an effort to address this, which went down to the level of the hubs, the integration and development multinational territories that were defined as the spaces for territorial articulation of South America. These hubs, which I think are an innovation in how the region is addressing the process of integration and development planning, they went through a process of developing specific strategies for each hub, understanding the specificity of the hub. Yeah. And I'm finishing now. A specific exercise was done for the hub, developing a business vision, a specific grouping of projects. For the projects, strategic functions were defined, anchor projects that give a sense of sequencing in the implementation sequencing were identified, and that sort of led to a landing of the big portfolio of projects on the surface of the territory that is now moving into, or oriented, guiding the financing and the project implementation decisions. And finally, there is the methodologies that Mauro talked about in his presentation, the methodologies for strategic environmental assessment, for production and logistics, the GeoSur product, which is a geographic information system to visualize and to analyze data from many different sources at a South American scale. And we still have the pending signature of a broader public participation and debate. We have not given up on developing some viable mechanism to allow this to happen, and it's a pending issue in the dialogue with the government. Sorry for the lengthy response.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Thank you all. I turn it over to El Jefe.
Jeff, thank you very much. I would like to thank all the participants, particularly the ones that came from afar, Carlos Nobri, Francisco, Felipe, and Tim. I would like to obviously thank you very much, Tom, for, in a sense, have inspired all this. And I want to thank your participation very much, and of those probably that via the internet are still with us. And I would like now to invite you to go 2 floors down and be with us in this reception as we open the Amazonia photography exhibit. If you want to hang your coats